Welcome everybody to the show. We got DJ from American Dharma joining us today. Welcome to Actuali. My friend, how are you today?
I'm doing good. Beautiful day. Bright puffy clouds. Cicadas screaming at me.
It is a beautiful day. So we got our band jamming here in the background. Hopefully all you can hear that all right. Yeah.
Wait for it. Wait for it. Wait for it.
She does. Whoa,
I hope Jesse approves of me mimicking playing guitar.
you got. I'm sure he approves.
Yeah, right.
Yes, yes. So that's from our new EP, Inmo. And thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Actuali Podcast. We welcome all of you. It's a beautiful day outside. Hot summer day, but we're into the evening now. We might catch a little bit of sunset in the background. We've got the Potomac River behind us.
Very scenic.
Yeah, welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah, hey, it's about time.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I'm glad I got you on here, man. And we're going to have to get Mr. James on here soon, too. I might have to do that one via Zoom, because the man is yonder. He's on important missions, traveling in far-off regions to help save the world.
Battling orcs.
Yeah, man. Indeed. So, yeah. We've been planning to do this one for a while. So much that we get to talk about together on our drives to and from the band practice space at Jesse's. And it's a beautiful drive, too. But yeah, we always get into these great conversations. So much happening in the world right now. We talk about this on the cast. The myriad existential crises that humanity is currently facing. Existential being life-ending, life-concerning. So these are internal crises happening within us and in the larger world collectively. And we're fortunate enough to get to make music together.
Yeah.
As one way of praying into that. Yeah. And it's awesome.
Yeah, the music is one of the things, I don't want to sound cliche, and that's like music makes the world go round and all that jazz, but it makes it a whole hell of a lot more tolerable. You know what I mean?
It really does. Yeah, it speaks for us, and it speaks to us in ways that nothing else can sometimes. Yeah.
But, it's also one of the most rewarding things you can do, whether you're playing it or listening to it. I think that's the draw of going to shows, right? Because, it's not just like, don't get me wrong, there are the people that are just like show collectors. Like, I've been to all these shows, and they collect it they collect pins.
Right,
really,
of course,
so,
it's like a passion for them. Yeah. That's awesome. But, those are your diehard fans, too. Those are like the greatest music listeners sometimes.
Yeah, and, and then even, like, I saw a picture of, just your random bland whatever street festival at a, market center that they call a village or whatever. But there's always that one dude that, he didn't look, may not be the guy that always goes, but was just having an awesome time. And like, was, I don't know, reliving dreams of, years past, and maybe he played music or whatever. But I've been thinking about that.
He's living through.
It's funny how you see an image and you just get this guy's life story just blasted at you, just like because everybody else is just like, oh yay, like this is great. And he's just like, yeah, like he's either related to somebody in the band, or he's just like, life's tough. I'm enjoying this. I'm having my best time doing this. And if you can't play music,
or he's done it, he's played it before, so he's related.
So even if you play music or not, but if you can't play music, the next best thing is seeing other people do it. In my opinion, I'm not a music listener, even though I'm a musician. I know.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thing, is that we can we can recognize virtuosity in somebody else, even if we don't know the skill. So you can watch a gymnast, you can watch an ice skater, you can watch a basketball player, football player do something really amazing in the moment, yet not know how to do it yourself, and still recognize the depth of the skill involved. And there's an excitement, there's a sense of awe, and there's a sense of overcoming that you experience, like through your mirror neurons, understanding the versatility and the agility of the movements.
That's the thing. Mirror neurons,
Yeah.
like that's like if you want to learn something, you do have to watch, and you know, and I think it goes a little bit more than just how the brain's constructed, right? You know, the mirror neurons are really nice, but you know, there's people who will never be able to play the instrument. They can watch you all day and night, and they'll still never play it. But well, I guess it is the mirror neurons, but you feel it fully, and it's, you know, it's not just like, oh, I learned by watching and this, that, or the other. It's like, no, you're going through the emotive thing. That's why when you see someone bust their shin trying to, you know, like go upstairs, you're like, and then you kind of, then you kind of laugh. But that's another thing.
But you know the feeling. Yeah. Like, yeah.
But you know, I think with music though, there's probably something deeper than just the mechanics of the brain. And I'm not knocking the brain. The brain is this wonderful.
It feels like it puts us in deep accord.
Yeah.
With the moment, and with music you can express things that cannot be said any other way. But it does seem to mirror the underlying nature of reality, in that there's this play on space and time, and there's this mathematical arrangement that is solving itself in a unique way that somehow chimes to us, like when you solve the puzzle in Zelda or something.
Yeah, right.
You know, you get that. And there's something about it, that everything is vibration, and that music is a vibration of waves.
Well, and it's also something that can hold your attention span. Okay, how to explain this? So when you're playing music or listening to music, what your brain's going to do is it's going to actively hear what you're hearing in the moment, but then once that moment's gone, you have a memory of the moment. And particularly if you're playing music or you know the song, then you're anticipating the next moment all at the same time. And when you're really in the zone, you've got all three of them. Remember where you were, where you're going, and where you're at. And one of the hardest things a new musician, whether young or old, deals with, like if they're trying to learn music or play with somebody, is always being slightly out of their own box. Like, so there's the box that's moving along with the time of the music, right?
Yeah.
And the perfect optimal zone is in that box and going with that box, but they're always slightly out because they're thinking about don't think about the part that don't think about the parts that are coming up, like, too much, because that'll mess you up, right?
Just be aware. Yeah, but don't think about,
And then the other is on the flip side of that, don't be thinking about the past too much, but you have to, like, be at the right angle of one on one side and one on the other side, and going with both of them, and be mindful of both of them. Yeah. And the payoff of doing that is you get in a really nice, you know, you get in a groove, or you get, you know, like...
You get into that flow state. Yeah.
Especially when you're doing improv music with people. Yeah. Because it's not all just like willy-nilly whatever. There's certain patterns that and particularly if you play with the same people, that you develop, and you get used to hearing it, and you kind of know where they're going, and tell if they got lost, or, you know, a whole variety of things. But in improv music, whether it be rock, jazz, or any of the things, you have to anticipate something that doesn't exist, and then be okay with it falling to utter garbage after the fact,
right?
Because you can't let that pull you down. So, like, particularly when you're playing in front of people, you know, so because, you know, it's a jam band. Sometimes things go to garbage. I challenge you, listen to old Grateful Dead or old, you know, any old jam band things. If you find the old recordings, there's parts of it that just...
It falls apart.
Yeah. But you know what? That makes it, when it comes back up with sores, if you can rescue it.
They find the
and if you can't, you make a joke out of it and you move on.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Yeah, but that's the art of playing on the edge. That improv is a great way of accessing. And the brain excels when it's in that place of trying to maintain or get that optimal grip on the situation of what's happening. So it's thinking, you know, like in the improv musical situation, they're playing together, you're playing at the edge of your ability, You see this with rock climbers or surfers.
Oh, for sure.
You're always pushing yourself at the edge of your ability, and that's where your skill set can come alive. And if you just free yourself to the moment, and people talk about how you just go into this kind of timeless state, it's almost like you're watching yourself do the thing.
Yeah.
We've all had this experience whenever we've tossed the crumpled up piece of paper into the wastebasket without looking, and it actually went right in. It's just because we did the math, we didn't think about it. We already had the skill set practiced well enough to be able to pull it off. So if we get our brains extra computation out of the way of thinking, is it going to make it, or it got to make it kind of thoughts, and just let it happen, then boom, there it goes.
Yeah. And, I think the brain is wired to naturally do that. And I'll back that up with my idea that, like throwing the thing in the bin and all that is like, a conscious act to a certain degree.
Sure.
Whereas, but think about when you slip on the stairs or do something where it's like you could have really got, like maybe not like mortally injured or
sure, but you
or anything,
yourself.
but you caught yourself and your body did something, crazy, and you're just like, whoa. It's like, your brain just was like, nope, I'm taking over for a split second. Okay, you're back. And music does that, and you can lose time. And the other thing is not just being in front of music and behind music, but there's also your thoughts existing within a really small period of time. Like, because when you're thinking of where you're going and what you're going to do, and all the like analyzing what your hands are doing, so you don't trip all over yourself. And it's not just all muscle memory, but the muscle memory helps. But then you have very long periods of time that you're holding concentration at the same time. So it's the smallest mode of time, and also the largest mode of time at the same time that you're thinking on while being in the moment. And your brain naturally does this.
There's something about the brain doing those two things at once, as it's narrowing in and it's expanding out at once. And Vervaeke talks about relevance realization. John Vervaeke, professor out of University of Toronto, cognitive scientist, 30-year Tai Chi and meditation practitioner and teacher, and just an amazing individual. He speaks on this at length, and we've talked about actually doing a series where we follow the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series that he did, and we comment on it as we're watching it. I think that'd be a really helpful way, because I'll sit there and I'll Google every term that we don't understand. We'll make sure we understand it every step of the way, and we'll show that to you all as viewers, so that you can actually really get the best. Because I've had to rewatch this thing a few times now, and I still haven't made it all the way to the very end of it. I've made it up into the 30s, I think. 30s or 40s, and there's 50 episodes. You put them out once a week over the course of a year, and they're an hour long each, and they're just tremendous, because he's talking about the meaning crisis in the world and how may we awaken from it and to it, and maybe how can we cure it. I talked about that a little bit on the last episode where we brought in Daniel Schmachtenberger, and I listened to a part of that episode with you, and he was talking about the explicit and implicate order that David Bohm describes. David Bohm, colleague of Einstein. And the hypothesis that Daniel was presenting was that if we can approach the myriad existential crises humanity now faces, which has been termed the meta crisis by those working on it, how best to attune to that would be from a state of wholeness. It's basically his hypothesis, what he's positing. And it seems that the flow state is the ideal state. And how to do that in dialogue, and how to do that in life, with everything, is to be in a meditative state. And this is why we meditate, because we can learn to ground ourselves in that experience and into the experience of presence itself, and letting go of all of our expectations, concerns, and worries, and rather instead being the witness, the watchful awareness of our thoughts and feelings as they arise, so that we're not so easily pulled around by them. And practicing anything like music allows us that, and it invites people into that. The word practice. The deeper you go, the more ecstatic that being.
You practice a lot of things. You practice your religion, you practice your sport, you practice your music. But it's not to be a hippie man, but like words mean something. I don't think they're just they're not as malleable as some would like to believe, but they're more malleable than they seem, and the wise people with words, I think, paid quite a bit of attention to that. And I'm not a man of words, but I'll butcher the English language like 5 or 6 different ways. But like words like.
But that's okay, because we all have a unique perspective on this, and we all can find a way to kind of beat around this bush and talk about this ineffable thing.
I wonder where the like someone's like go practice this, practice that, or the other, and it's like screw it, I don't want to do it. It's like, where's that coming from? Because like not to bring up the nature versus nurture, but I don't think it can be a nature thing, because we feel best when we're doing something that requires practice, which is intent to become better or more along the line, or have better understanding, or all those things. But practice seems like a hard thing.
It is,
and I one of those things.
But it's a kind of a play.
Yeah.
But it's the kind of play that like playing a violin is. It's like serious play. I
guess like what do you think you're getting out?
It's committed play, almost. Yeah.
I guess what do you think you're getting out of it is a thing too, because you could have two athletes, and one of them becomes great, and one of them doesn't become as great, and the one who's great has a different motivation.
Sure.
Whereas the other one who doesn't become great, maybe has something else that they're good at, and they choose to go with that, or they don't want to be that singular, individual at the top of the thing, or maybe not as much as the other. But like, how do we encourage, or not even how do you encourage something that people aren't even aware of? How do we help facilitate that good feeling that you get from practice, whatever it is that you're practicing?
By sharing it, by sharing our art with the world, and whatever virtuosity we can achieve as an expression of being in concert, and a celebration of being in concert with this great mystery of life that we have, this great chance to experience. It feels like such a gift, even as it is so harsh. It's like we still want to live, and we're sad if we ever get to the point where we think about ending our own lives. That what is the reason that it all feels like it matters so much? Of course, there's survival, but you spoke on there must be an adaptation within us, and I do believe there is. We recognize the flow state. We enjoy watching it. It excites us. This is why
going to shows. It doesn't even have to be humans that we watch either. Dolphins doing their little flips, sports, and stuff like that.
It doesn't even have to be humans. You're right. You see dogs, bunny rabbits, anything do something amazing.
Seeing something in nature like that stag that's like, I've been here for 6-7 years. It's like, wow.
And it's
good on you, bud. You're doing good. You avoided the cars.
So there's something about recognizing that helps us attune to the state of being in virtuous flow, virtuosity. And virtuosity brings us to the state of being virtuous, so honoring the present moment. The idea, the word sin actually means miss the mark, like the arrow falling short of the target. So to miss the mark, and I heard this once expressed as to not be in the state of presence. So when we let our minds get carried away, or we get lost in our daydreams and thoughts, and we start to torture ourselves with our emotions and the feelings that are arising, instead of just being detachedly aware, but from a loving place, which is a capacity that we human beings seem to have. And that again brings us into the flow state, being in a state of unconditionality, no conditions, everything is as it is, respond as needed to what's happening. Because this is just this one thing that is unfolding that there's actually a miracle.
There's a component in here that I don't think you've named yet, but like gratefulness and graciousness, right? Like particularly when it comes to service, is like when I see people who do service jobs, and I don't mean like flipping burgers, but like jobs of service to people. It's not the thank you so much and all that other stuff. It's the feeling grateful to be of service. Like I don't think EMTs and fire people and all that other stuff, they're doing it for the accolades. I think they're doing it probably, deep purpose to help people, but I think that, it gives them a feeling of graciously being of service and having gratitude to do it, because not everybody can. And someday you won't be able to.
Yeah. And that really matters. And that gives a deep sense of belonging and meaning to one's life. That level of engagement.
Something that I bring up to young people a lot, young people. I'm not that old, but, young people. particularly young men, is find out how to be helpful. What can you be helpful with? How can you be of service in that way to be helpful? And that's, the lowest rung on the ladder of, like, if you want to get any sort of, and I don't mean success, money and all that other success, but success towards your goals of what
meaning,
you want to be.
A sense of meaning, a sense of belonging, self-worth.
Well, exactly. The meaning. What is your meaning?
Depressed,
like, how are you going to find your identity? How are you going to find an identity without a meaning and a purpose? And if your purpose is to be useful,
right?
And maybe it's not for everybody, but I'd say give it a try.
Well, we're social beings, and we don't feel as comfortable with the environment around us unless we know that we're in our optimal state as an individual and as a collective. So we get all these signals, anxiety and depression, when we're not in alignment.
No wonder we're so freaking depressed.
But if we are joining in with the tribe, or we're doing what we can to help, we're carrying the heaviest rock we can carry and putting it down where it needs to go, we're finding a way to be of service, then we feel like we're in concert with it, with our tribe, and we're being honest with ourselves. We're pushing that edge of our boundaries. We also know that we are attending to the matter at hand. So our village does need to survive, and the more work that I am able to put in to help, the more likely I am to survive long term, and everyone else is. Now, so we're genetically tuned.
Disclaimer though, you got to know also when to say two things.
Oh, I need to rest.
Like, I don't want to, because like you literally don't want to do it, or even if you're not, like, hey, I don't want to crawl in that tiny little hole. Like right now, I'm 33 years old. I don't want to climb in the tiny hole. I'm not exactly narrow, but what? Somebody else might be like, hey, I want to do that. It's like, cool, because then you get the tag team, and then I can't.
Yeah,
I can't. We shouldn't be afraid to say I can't. They're like, no, like, you don't say that because you can't if you don't try. No, like, sometimes you just can't do things. Like, I can't fit into that tiny little hole, and I don't want to fit in that tiny little hole. Hey, man, you want to get in this hole? I'll buy you lunch.
That's a great expression of.
And I was the guy who got in the hole too. One thing. Also, hang out with your elders. You'll hear a lot of good stories. You'll hear a lot of good stories over and over again. But then you'll also. That's a fast track to learning how to be helpful. It's like, and how to anticipate what somebody's going to need, and also read people's capacities of what they can do. Because you don't want to be all up on somebody when they're trying to do something, but, be like the surgeon's nurse. They know exactly what you need when you want, and you can watch them. And that's like the mirror neuron thing again. When you're watching somebody, you're inevitably learning. And if you're young, if you're like, I don't know, 15 to 25, your brain's still going like real hard. So anybody, young people listening, watch, listen, learn. As Mr. Bill has said, just keep your mouth shut.
Soak it up.
Yeah, he would say something else, but I want to keep the cursing down.
From anybody, anything. You can learn how not to be. You can learn why not to be. You can learn how to be. We're all great teachers for each other.
And also learn what's for you and what's not for you too, because how are you gonna make a decision where you're going and what you're doing if you don't even know what your preferences are, as far as like, what are you good at? Okay, you're good at a bunch of things, but what do you really like, and what do you feel?
Really have room to excel at.
Well, and you don't really know that until you do it. I wanted to be an astronaut too, but I really don't like the idea of being smushed against the back of my seat, thrown up in space, having 0 G, and that's not for me. I like the ground, man, and I learned that because I've gone up high in things, and been in dangerous situations. Not as dangerous as that, but when you're operating machinery and stuff, it's like. Okay, way bigger and meaner than I am, and it'll crushulate you. I do enjoy that to a certain extent, but I learned, like me personally, I learned what I was good at, and I'm good at quite a few things, but quite a few things. But music is one of them, and then turning ideas into three-dimensional, actual existing things. So that's I've focused entirely on that. Don't ask me to do some paperwork or manage certain little thing. I'm hopeless when it comes to normal peopling. Not so hopeless, but it's like got to work on that end. But find what you're good at. I've got good people around me that learned me a thing or two.
You have good interpersonal skills.
comes from watching people, man. Because when you don't know what people are doing or why they're doing it, you just watch them, and then you'll still be like, I don't know why you're doing it. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know, this makes no sense. Why do we keep doing this? I'm not saying it's your fault. It's probably mine.
Yeah.
But I do not get what you are doing and why. So you watch, and you learn, and then you learn to emulate, and that's like that. That requires and also gives you the ability to reflect while you're in the mode of doing something, which leads right on back to the flow state. You can do it in peopling as well.
Yeah, you can.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, if you experience a lot of anxiety in groups of people, one thing that I found that helps tremendously is breathing deep belly breaths, especially if you've learned to meditate, or even practice the art of just self-inquiry in general, which is just bringing one's sense of awareness into this present moment, this very feeling of now, of being alive right here and now. And it doesn't have any thoughts to it. Thoughts appear in this field of awareness, but this sense of now is instantly familiar. It's the same as when we were young, the sense of now, the sense of being present, the sense of being here.
But now that could last forever. It was always a perpetual
It's
sunset.
ageless, but there's always this underlying feeling to reality. So if we look back on an old memory, just any random memory where we weren't doing anything particular, and the feeling of being of being present is the same. And you can drill into that. You can turn your awareness in on this sense of consciousness that it has, and just be present with presence, and it turns into abiding as presence. And you do this whenever you think of, and you can do it along with belly breathing. Belly breathing helps reset the nervous system, so you get a good 15 belly breaths in. You effectively reset the nervous system, release beneficial endogenous hormones.
It also gives you something to do that requires
puts you in
the
control
lowest
too.
form of energy, which is breathing.
Yeah, oxygenates the body. It optimizes the brain. It decreases the stress because the brain's not working as hard to think. It's more clear. The world becomes more vivid, so you can understand the situation a little more easily, and you'll start to notice your stress and anxiety decrease. Especially after that 15th breath, you'll have effectively pretty well reset yourself, and then you can just trust the flow and let conversation happen. Let the people be as they are.
And don't be afraid to be a little weird.
Yeah.
And I don't mean creep people out.
You're great for that, man.
But be yourself, because you're no good at being anybody else. I can say that pretty
that's the point of the podcast, finding out what is the actual I.
So go ahead and start finding that, because like I've tried, and I gave up trying to be anybody else. And it's also a great way to, like, not everybody is for everybody else either. You know, that's why we create, like, if you look at a party, people with similar or sympathetic energies all grouped together. That's why we like parties.
You can probably deal with just about anybody.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You know, the right environment and circumstances.
No, I've had good times with people that I'm not their cup of tea, and they're not really my cup of tea, but over years and years and years and years, you know, like, it's more than just tolerate each other. We actually like each other, but, you know, sometimes, you know, I can see them going, all right, man, come on.
Yeah, recognizing our different views.
And then I'm like, okay, grumpy face. You can keep being grumpy.
Humor is a powerful thing that humans have access to as well. That must be ancient in us, because we have this automatic laugh response and joy response.
Well, you know, even apes and other animals.
It's a great way of dealing with
you.
Difficult situations and difficult disagreements and complex subjects. Like, we found ways to joke and make ourselves laugh.
Definitely a good release for everybody. Even
for very hard times that are sad, we found ways with Gallows Humor.
Yeah, and, you know, a key component to, like, what made the, you know, comedy, as far as, like, stand-up comedy really a thing, like, you know, there for a while, like, comedy was king, and everybody, you know, wanted to go out to comedy shows and get this laugh and get this opening up and releasing, and, you know, truly the safest place that there ever was the comedy club. If you have a good comedian, if somebody's getting roasted, everybody's getting roasted.
Yeah.
You know, that's...
Nothing is taboo. Yeah. Everything can be looked at and dealt with through our sense of humor. And that's another aspect of our lovingness. It's an unconditionality.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. It's finding a way to laugh at absurdity, the absurdity of existence.
Oh, laughing at the absurdity of, you know, that might actually be those cases, you know, when you're at a festival, or even, you know, like sitting on a hill and you decided to eat some mushrooms or whatever and sit there and you just start laughing. Maybe that's what it is. You're just laughing at the beautiful absurdity of like the entire freaking universe.
Yeah. The fact that the whole thing is so ambiguous, yet it comes with this glowing sense of lovingness. It's just blissful as well. The encounter with that.
I say laughing.
This experience we're talking about has been spoken of in all the great religions, all the great wisdom schools of past, and it is evoked when we feel goosebumps, when we hear something special in the song that really strikes us, or something that really powerful happens in a movie and it moves us, or like a baby is born, or there's certain experiences in our life you forget about your entire sense of self. And and we notice it quite often in like different gradations. Like you notice the day is beautiful, or it's a beautiful sunset, the clouds are lit a certain way, and it like takes you away from yourself for a moment. And this is a thing that we seek to escape to through sugary and salty foods and junk food television and things like that, is that we're trying to fill this void, this part of us that wants to be here now with this ongoing beauty of this world. And we found all kinds of interesting artificial ways to,
well, in some ways to enhance, but in other ways
enhance, but also
I'll call it the sugar phenomenon. Like sugar, the reason
the
why we
double-edged
crave
sword
sugar
aspect of every
rare.
tool that we create, really, isn't it?
No matter how great your toys are, if you get too many of them, you're going to lose the fun, at least with some of them.
Yeah, so there's an optimal balance with life. I was listening to, I forget what I was listening to as a podcast, but it's talking about how there's these beetles in India, and these brown beetles, and the males started mistaking brown beer bottles for ideal female matches. And so when they actually
there's an insert whatever culture drinking joke there. Just saying.
Okay, so right
now I'm just imagining. Oh, man.
It's hilarious.
Oh,
so
boy.
when they actually did find their way back to the female beetles, they weren't really procreating as much, and it was affecting the beetle population. And the beetles were actually important to the life chain, the food chain in the environment. So they had to start outlawing and picking up all of the brown beer bottles to help the beetles.
So the real deep question here, though, is which
animals,
end was the front?
Even animals can get fooled. So there's an ambiguous nature to reality. It's hard to figure out where there is stable ground to stand on. And what we can say is home is where the heart is. It is within us. We can turn our attention within and to the sense of this present moment. We can also worshipfully feel a sense of reverence for this great mystery. You don't even have to be religious to do this, but this is the religio that humans seem to love to take part in, and perhaps need to take part in, because there is this great mystery that somehow evokes a sense of oneness and interconnection and glowing love and bliss. When you really narrow into it and you start to realize this, it hits you like beyond intellectually, experientially. The underlying nature of reality is a sense of like oneness with everything. That the great meditators and the great preachers and the great shaman of our past have been teaching for eons in various ways. Each have their own cultural motifs and ways of expressing it, and their own cultural packaging that you can, from their time.
And
but they're all
you
all
can
these
feel that
parables,
thread current that moves through,
koans,
like whether. Regardless of what
songs, poems.
The drapery on the outside looks like, there's a current on the inside that's flowing that's the same.
Yes. It's all pointing to the same thing. Humans have been, and it's literally just this great, we can use the word divine undertaking. It is, even for the materialistic minded atheist, let's say, for the scientist that believes in physical reality and doesn't necessarily want to believe in the idea of a God and perhaps the organized Christian sense that we saw God in past.
Well, those people are brave. That's the most terrifying idea.
Well, it's
not just the lights out thing.
Beautiful conglomeration of God being a very harsh judge, and then later in the New Testament,
I guess what I'm saying is atheism is terrifying. Yeah. That there's nothing. There's nothing
turn
else.
Into nihilism, I think.
Yeah.
Well, it's a certainty, and that's anti-science. You're not supposed to be certain. You're supposed to be always questioning. So anyways, I do believe, like, even us, from a scientific frame point, materialistic frame point, can be in awe of the infinite nature of this universe, how it began from out of time and space, how it was something was omnipresent and almost omniscient, that exploded itself out. Even if it, yeah, that it from an infinitesimal point into everything in the universe that leads up to, so the ingredients for this moment right now, this very conversation, were there in that infinitesimal, timeless space that somehow burst itself open. And that has led up to the reality that we are now, and we are now these extensions of Earth, Earthlings, as we call ourselves, and the children of literally of sunlight, and Earth, that has grown through evolution to produce who we are now in this moment. So we literally are aspects of the universe that have become self-aware, self-reflective, self-conscious,
I guess it's
that are looking back on itself, and that is something to be in awe of. That's the great mystery.
and
So even from that standpoint, we can gain entrance.
Yeah, and
Sorry, that was a long spiel.
One way to, I guess, look at, like, it's one thing to be like, okay, everything just went and it's everything, and everything on the inside is the outside, but if you think about it, as every iteration reformats itself and changes itself and breaks it down. That's why fractals go infinitely out and infinitely in. Now, I'm not saying that, like, pre-Big Bang, the entire universe as it is now was in there, but every piece to make it was in there, and then it reformats, reshapes. Yeah. And, things like, you have nebula, which birth stars, and then you have stars that go through their sequence that give potential for different, phenomenon that are creating potential for something else. And then eventually the star gets big, explodes, turns into...
And then all those elements that it created in its
go back out in another way.
Particularly
if it takes out some, planets and other stuff that have atoms, different types of organic chemistry. Now it's all going to get fried for the most part, but the universe is made up of a lot of tiny little things that the potential of them getting together is very, very nil, and somehow it still does it.
Yes.
That's always one thing that's baffled me, is like the bigness of space, to the point where, like, if you get into interstellar space and you can travel almost the speed of light, the chances of you hitting something are pretty much nothing.
Yeah. There's so much space.
Even going through a nebula, your chances of actually hitting something that makes up that nebula is nil.
It's crazy. The space between the galaxies is crazy long, and the space between the stars is literally lifetimes, going at the speed of light in most cases.
Just even size.
There's more stars in any galaxy. No, there's more. Yeah, there's more galaxies in the universe that we've counted so far than there are stars in any one galaxy, and there's hundreds of billions of stars in most galaxies, like our own, which is 200 to 300 billion.
And we can only see so far.
More galaxies than stars in any one galaxy, and there's so much space between them. Like, you're right, you could go forever just starting at a point and go straight, and you wouldn't run into anything. You might not even see anything for...
Well, you could even go through a nebula. You could go through an old, like, supernova, whatever, and your chances of getting hit by things are nil, except for the radiation, the cosmic radiation, which is all encompassing and touches everything, unless you create this nice little ball with the atmosphere that, also the hostility of, like, how beautiful the universe is. But, like, when you look at that, beautiful, wispy, whatever, how actually hostile to this precious thing we call life is. And even just how violent it is, like,
look at the hostile creatures it creates here, and sharks and tigers.
Volcanoes, which you can't say a volcano is malicious, but it's hostile but necessary. It's a necessary component to create what this is that we have now.
It is.
So, like, all that, from the stars, from the initial explosion, if that's
life is as it is because of all the challenges, because of the volcano melted down all the pre-existing life, and then it having to grow again, but it's growing out of this now super lush and fertile soil, and it reacclimates, and then then the plants gain a memory over a time, so they know how to spread their seeds now, such that when the volcano starts heating up, they burst out, and it's crazy how evolution works. And I heard this one talk by Daniel Schmachtenberger, not to cut you off there, hold that thought, on emergence, and he talked about how we can see ourselves as agents, not separate from evolution, but as evolution itself, and now consciously able to take part in where we go as a species. And this is where we can start to utilize this faculty, this orientation of love that we actually can possess as beings, that we've developed also as a social adaptation, it would seem. But this also seems to be the sense, the feeling of the underlying nature of our sense of presence. There's a lovingness to it, of the sense of reality itself. It seems the deeper that we go into experience of presence, the deeper that sense of oneness and love, the more pronounced it becomes, and the more easily in flow and with life in all ways we can be.
So we tend to forget, though, and this isn't a criticism on you or anything like that, or on any all, but we forget, and this is the volcano thing and all that stuff, is like how love also encompasses sheer destruction and havoc as well. It has to, because it is everything that connects everything. And
if you look at the term God as an acronym, generative, omnipresent, destructive is one way of putting it. Yeah.
And not only destructive, it's like
not in a negative sense, but just that it does end and repeat, but it always
and not within the moral sense either. But and it has to. You can't,
a rose is only beautiful because it dies.
Yeah, and the rose only exists is because a lot of other roses died and everything else died to feed it.
It's valued and precious because it is finite, doesn't last forever.
And I feel
so we treasure things more deeply, knowing that they don't last forever.
I feel we tend and this is the we.
That helps evolution
all of us
too. Yeah.
This is the all of us we that I'm talking about, but we tend to shy away from that end way too much, and that's the head in the clouds utopia thing in my mind. I don't mean to be that rough, but I've seen it. I've
utopianism as a goal.
Well, and not specifically utopian in the sense of that, but like the idea of like, well, if we just all love each other and do this, that, or the other, and don't look at actually, okay, well, yes, we can do that and that's fine, but there's these things that are happening, and some of them have to freaking happen. Like you have to get boo-boos, you have to scrape your knee,
they're hard to look at.
You have to break a bone or two in order.
They're hard to deal with. Yeah. So this is perfect because we are dealing with many existential crises individually. And collectively as a species, and the sense, and I keep thinking about this, like how does it feel for somebody young growing up in the world now? Because I remember what it felt like for myself, having a sense that we were on the verge of either triumphantly succeeding or failing disastrously as a species, because all of these pieces were now in play. Well, I remember like when I was a kid in the 80s, it was still the tail end of the Cold War, so we got to do these drills where you go into your desk for a possible nuclear bombing drill, and we'd go under our desk with our backpacks on our backs and do this like turtle shell thing. And so the reality of there being a profound existential threat to our species was there from a young age for me, and now we don't even have that kind of like 3-power or 2-power self-balancing system of like US and China and Russia, all 3 with nukes, keeping the world from going into another war, because no one wants to destroy the world, of course, but now it's accessible by any small organization or group that wants to do destruction, like nuclear fissile material or this and that is much more easily accessed. That's just one. That's just one. And we're all vaguely aware that there's many ways that we could actually either end the species or end the planet.
It's way easier to take out the mind than it is to take out cities. They think it's
we're very concerned with how we poison the oceans with radioactive waste, pesticides. We're very concerned with how we're destroying the life cycle and the health of the soil. The micro nutrients in the soil are dying off. There's so much pesticide. So
we got to figure out the things that we need to do.
The oceans,
the things we should stop doing.
Horrifying things that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and we really need to figure out the things that we can do.
Yeah.
And what we need to do, because right now, and not to get on my soapbox or nothing, but we're pouring, and this is the world, pouring resources into something we have very little control of. When there's does Flint, Michigan still have bad water?
Right.
Like, dude.
How many other cities?
And like, I get it. I'm not one of those people that say, oh, you can snap a finger and do it. But no, I know people can do it. You just got to let them fix their own stuff. Let people fix their own stuff. Because right now we got this whole push that, oh, well, we're building this system that's going to fix it for you and do it. You just got to do what's in the system. Yeah, well, you know what? I've seen a lot of things like communes and other stuff like that. And we have this system that we're going to do, and it all freaking falls apart. You know, when you centralize the authority within people that are, you know, and how can you have all the experts on everything in a small group of people, really?
So that's
like,
where I was
you know,
touching on
it's
with
like,
utopianism, like
yeah.
expecting a central authoritative structure to fix everything for us.
Well, you got to grow that central structure
this,
if you want to get all the experts from everybody in on it. And now,
even in a system like ours, it's so easily corrupted by financial interests that gain as much power or more so than the GDP of our own government collectively, and they start to form groups like WEF and
particularly when you have sovereign governments that are acting in a way to benefit the people that are in the governments and their team, opposed to their constituents, and you know that gets said a lot. But you got to think.
So it seems like we're getting at what is the cure to this, and we're talking about interconnected.
One cure is, you know, don't let people regulate you.
Yeah.
You know, like, mind you, some things should be regulated because they're dangerous, but that's more of like, we should encourage people to learn about things before messing with it. But
there used to be so much.
But having a centralized force that says you can do it, but you can't. Like, how is that morally feasible?
Yeah, you can't. So every way we've tried has failed.
And it's a scaling issue because you can do that in a small community, but you can't do that.
The interdependent nodes of the network are all self-sustainable and independent and well-informed and wise. Sure. And so the only way that we seem to be able to do that is to more actively enter into our flow state as individuals.
I'm still listening.
And
I'm gonna grab that.
And find those ways to be able to optimize our flow state with other people.
Yeah.
I think that's the great challenge, because whatever systems we have inevitably become corrupt. And we know that a central authoritative body forcing people into acquiescence and being good doesn't work. It's the revolution must begin within. Seems to be where this all turns to.
And it has to be voluntary as well. Like, you know,
it must be inspired. It must be inspired.
Like, if you want social well-being, and if you want an ideal socialism, and I'm not, you know this about me, I'm not a socialism person. I have friends who are socialists, and we can argue, and it's fine. But the only way I think that any type of socialism can work is it's people who decide to participate, like your charities and what like churches do and other stuff. The congregation all decides, oh, I'm going to be here and I'm volunteering and you know, people are like, well, how are you going to make people pay their fair share? It's like, well, stop thinking about fair share, because the more we actually start all existing in ways that are beneficial to each other, like, you know,
just have the freedom.
Be helpful. The more that we're being helpful,
as helpful as you can. And not to judge each other according to how helpful we
opposed
are.
Opposed to, you know, pushing off our responsibility to be helpful and do that ourselves onto some conglomerate thing, and, you know,
we gotta take it back into our own hands. I think that really is how we change the world from the inside out. Is it begins within ourselves.
Just do it and and you'll inevitably find other people doing it.
Yeah, if we practice being more and more consistently present, then we're going to be able to be more aware and more responsive and more available to the world around us, honestly, and in a virtuous manner. And therein lies our access to virtuosity, because we have, with good heart, worked hard on something that we wish to share. So as artists, this is a way that we can help inspire the world to lean into presence a little bit more.
And probably as deep as you possibly can as art.
The only way we can do this is to address the root. There's myriad problems, all stemming from our inability to find ways of being congruent with one another as a species and with our environment. Which is a living environment, and it's so fragile. And astronauts notice this, the overview effect in the song that we just played, Astronaut Eyes. I'm singing about this girl that's got the overview effect. So I'm imagining somebody that has experienced a perspective shift, such as astronauts experience when they finally get up there and they look back on Earth and they're like, oh my God, we really are all one, and it's experiential. There's no borders drawn on the planet out there, and you can see this thin, fragile atmosphere that shells us and protects us. And you realize what a miracle this cradle of life is.
And just
floating
think about,
out here in all this infinite space.
Like, I know you can't see like. Well, actually, no, you can't see the entire planet. If you look out at the planet from that far, chances are you can see the entire planet in your view. How many people do you think you're looking at one period? Like,
Oh my God.
how many? Yeah, dude.
Wow.
So there's got to be something
What a
that's a
thought.
little bit more hippy dippy to that. That's not just scientific in the brain. Like, you know, like you're literally looking at the souls of billions of people when you're up that high looking at the planet. What does
That's
that do
wild.
to you? And you know,
You feel
and
it.
we simulate that effect through like you
Yeah.
know churches, entheogens, music, that other effect where it's you know like say like in when you got like 10,000 people all listening to the same band, they're all sharing that same experience. It's not exactly the same as looking at billions of people on a thing, but you have 10,000 people all experiencing that same thing together. So it's like the inverse of that effect. Instead of being outward looking and it's everything looking out at this focal point, the band, the singular point that's pulling them through it. So yeah, you can have the overview effect on the underside.
You can. Yeah, no, you absolutely can. It works from any angle. Yeah.
Especially when you like, you know, the draw people have to like going out to parks and wonderful looking places because that you
Going
automatically
camping,
get that.
going to the beach.
Look
just
at
laying
look
there.
at a canyon or something that like go
God,
to
dude.
Kansas. Look at Kansas if you want to see something that's so imposably flat and big. Go to Kansas. It's like I'm a country boy. I grew up in these mountains, and dude, the flatness, the all-encompassing flatness of that was a
It's
lot, dude.
destabilizing
Yeah, and it was just,
unsettling.
there was no corn or anything to like block the. No, it was like flat. It was, oh man, not my favorite, favorite landscape, but it was worth going through Kansas for those few hours that we went through Kansas. Saw an awesome storm though that came up, and it was also imposingly big. When they make like like snake gods, like that are storm gods that are coming up on you. Yeah, how do you explain this thing? And it's crawling up on you on lightning legs, like a millipede, just
I do
sideways.
love those
and
moments
just, like,
where I get
boom.
a clear, wide expanse of the horizon. I can see far in every direction. That's really special to find. And to see the cloud formations, that must be something wild out there. There's storms brewing.
Yeah.
Earth is amazing.
Yep, and we're the best thing she ever produced, so we should stop crapping on ourselves for it.
Yeah,
And being
well,
so
we're crapping on ourselves
ungrateful
as though
about
we're
it.
separate from Earth. And
So ungrateful that
we're like
Earth made us.
talking about ourselves as
Took a long
cancers
time.
on the planet. Well, certainly we are having a cancerous effect, but we are Earthlings. We are Earth, learning how to be self-aware agents through itself. Like we are the planet. We are extensions of this self-reflective, self-aware extensions of this planet.
We may be more sophisticated at
We're animate ones that walk atop instead of being planted in like the trees.
We may be more sophisticated in our destructive nature, but it is still nature. Like like one of the first extinctions that took out
nature,
the pre-mammals was a single-celled organism that lived in the sea and turned it acidic, and then the air became toxic and killed off all the big mammals. And then the only ones we're descended from the tiny little ones that were smart enough to stay in the ground. It's also why I don't want to be an astronaut anymore, because I'd rather be like on the ground, in the ground, halfway in between. Those are the ones that lasted. But like this idea that humans are uniquely this destructive force that's way worse than anything else. It's like, well, what makes us worse is the fact that we are aware of what we do. But overpopulation of species is a thing, even regardless of humans messing around, because species do migrate across the planet. The reason why the dominant ones are the dominant ones where they're at is because they became the dominant ones.
Yeah.
We're aware of our destructive capability, and
we also have the greatest potential to be the greatest stewards.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of my greatest arguments for like save the humans, not just save the whales and save the dolphins, but save the humans, because they're the only ones capable of stopping the next asteroid. If you really care about life on planet Earth, you don't want all the baby animals to die.
and well, now at this point with our
let's try and save the humans while we still can.
And with our level of technology, and there's a moral question on this, but we'll also be able to save the genomes of animals. Like we're already doing with plants through seeds and stuff like that, but we're getting pretty close to the point where instead of having seed banks, you'd have genome banks, and then you could rebuild the genome from data that's, I don't know, laser burnt and scanned in crystal.
Wow.
We're not there. Well, maybe we are. I don't know. Like, what do they say?
Right,
The government's always like 50 years ahead. But we're getting to the point of understanding where you're understanding the building blocks. It's just we don't have the technology to make the building blocks and assemble them yet.
Right.
And we're pretty
yes.
crafty. We didn't have these touchscreen
be
cell
able to
phones when I graduated high
modify.
school. We had that old school razor that got real hot in your pocket
Yeah.
that was this freaking big.
Yeah, but maybe 200 years from now, we're literally going to be modifying the molecular structure of sand and turning it into gold for high conductivity electronics or something.
Well,
like that.
at
We'll have the
that point,
capacity.
we could probably just take sheer
That's
energy
something
and
that
turn
is
it into
coming.
whatever.
Yeah.
But I think there's a balance,
Oh, right.
though, because there's
Yeah.
only so much energy in the universe, and there's only so many ways that you can transport from one mode to another.
But we know how much energy there is inside
Sure,
one atom when you
sure.
split it, so it's tremendous.
But that's all at once, you know. How do you make that a stream instead of a boom?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's but I don't know. I think we're doing a pretty good job, though. Like,
We're doing better than we think. I think.
yeah. We're still
We're doing better
messing
than we give
up, but-
ourselves credit for. We should see the saving graces of our species and how sociable we've become. We've developed music, we've developed arts, we've developed the capacity to laugh and to make jokes, to deal with complex, difficult subjects. We have developed the capacity for love, and that seems to be the source of our creation and our passion and our appreciation. And this love is the most important thing. When they interview and ask people what are the most meaningful experiences in your life, they're love related, relationship related, and what are the most painful experiences in your life, they're love and relationship related.
Unless you're a complete narcissist and it's like, oh, the best time of my life is when I did this.
And how do you create
Kidding.
without loving the thing that you're involved in as you create? So you love music, and it becomes easy to express music through music, and so on. So we have this way to orient with what seems, because love seems to put us in the highest state of congruence and accord, right, with the underlying nature of reality. It allows us a wisdom that can see from all perspectives. You can put yourself in others' shoes because you're seeing beyond conditions. You're being unconditional. So we're talking about this kind of like agape kind of love, I think. And it's the love that the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Christians, the ancient Christians were all speaking of. All the great mystery schools or wisdom schools were speaking of. That God is love, as Martin Luther King said when he's quoted from the first epistle of John. He said this Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Jewish notion that God is love is the one thing that unites all of these different traditions. They all recognize this as the supreme unifying principle of life. It does give us the wisest orientation to approach things. We become so much more considerate, so we can more deeply consider, and thus love leads to wisdom instead of vice versa, as Buddha put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a side, but not a side. It'll come back in. But for a long time, I've been trying to figure out what the opposite of love is, and you go through this like, oh well, love. The opposite is hate. But it's like, well, I think hate comes from somewhere else, and other people have spoken on this.
I don't know if there even is.
I think it's fear.
I think you're getting closer when you say fear.
It's fear because, like, and
fear
in
stems
Keely,
from
fear
sadness.
fear from separation.
I think fear and sadness
Well,
maybe are almost
fear is an
synonymous.
instinctual. It happens, and it's responsive to something.
It's a regret, a disappointment that things
'cause-
won't end up right. So it's
So-
all related to our fear of death.
Imagine the infant. Imagine an infant has no concept of any high mind ideas or anything. All it knows is the mom. The first trauma we ever experience in life is when mom puts us down. And why do you think they wail their heads off? It's terrifying.
They've been
inside.
inside
What's the
and living communally.
the worst
with,
punishment
now
you can
they're
do
on the
to
outside and
Yeah.
feeding from, and this is the safety.
And what's the worst punishment you can do to a kid? You ostracize them from the group.
Yeah.
And so much so that if you do it too much, you can completely damage a child and make it so their brain doesn't even fucking work to be able to
Become a
speak.
loner more than they might want them to be, or
Anybody who's interested,
autistic even.
check out the Wild
maybe
Children.
Not autistic, but under socially developed or have trauma.
Well, it affects the structure of the brain. So,
or anger issues.
but for anybody who's interested, check out like the feral children. And there's been early psychological studies, and and this was an era where we're trying to figure out what makes humans humans. Some of it, if you've got a weak stomach for the atrocities of what science can be, might be hard for you. A lot of it's actually quite touching, but the children never learn how to speak and will never be able to speak, even though they'll understand the concept of like who's their mom, who's their dad, they're setting the table, like who's normal people stuff, but will never learn to speak. And if you don't touch a baby frequently when it's a baby, it will die. So connection is probably the most integral thing that makes humans like we are.
It helps us learn.
And no wonder we're having so many issues where we're all so depressed and feeling so alone and whatever, because like we literally are using things that we're supposed to bring us together in ways where it separates you. Maybe not physically pull you apart, but like how many times do you see people looking at their cell phone or the old school looking at their paper and just cutting off from other people? And even like go out to the bar or the coffee shop or wherever you go out to people and observe how they interact with each other, and you'll start to see very guarded separatory behaviors, if you will, from stances and other stuff like that. And even between like close friends groups and stuff like that, and I don't mean close friends groups like people who are really deeply friends, but like your clique, if you will, you'll even see what looks like open, hey, I love you, but is even more guarded. And I'm not bringing this up to like crap on anybody. I'm bringing it up because you do it too. We do it too. Yeah. And so it's like, and certain barriers are important, but I guess you could call it barrier work, but working on like how far are you putting things out there? Because then you see other instances where like, and it could be two random strangers, but genuinely have like this really awesome interaction and it dissolves apart. But then the useful barriers, they can be bad, but they're useful. They get put maybe on the side. So even though there's a bunch of loud stuff going on, like, the chess players who sit there and have this thing, there's no barrier between them other than the game they're playing, but that's hardly a barrier. That's more of a like, bringing together thing, but all distractions gone. Yeah. So like we can't just completely get rid of the negative emotions, the barrier, the ego, and all these things. These are very useful tools that we've developed over billions of, that life developed over billions of years.
We're perhaps misusing them.
Sure. Oh, you can definitely misuse a screwdriver.
Our intentionality is so important, and we find ourselves operating through frames of perception. So when we speak of the ego, not just the sense of I am better than everybody kind of ego.
No, the thing that separates us so we can have this conversation.
And it's good to make note of this. I remember Jesse made note of this in my episode with him, and that's a really good reminder because a lot of people might not know what you mean when you say ego. So we're talking about the psychological sense of self, the frame, the perception through which we see reality, which is like based off of the jumbles of thoughts and behaviors and conditioning that we've accumulated. The observer that thinks itself separate from the observed. Yes.
Which is useful, like when you gotta, compartmentalize things, be objective about things. But like, say if you use it too much, then you can't feel other people's feelings. And we have a psychological condition called, it starts out, the lowest end is like narcissism, but then you get up into sociopathy and then psychopathy. And psychopathy tends to be actual trauma-based, from my understanding. Like, bad childhood or something happens and your brain goes and it turns off the ability to process other people's feelings. And then there's people who are born like literally cannot feel other people's feelings, and
that's very, very rare.
Well,
that can also be suppressed in the society as well. You can raise the level of sociopathy in your
and you can use it as a tool too.
Materialistic,
call it my internal
gluttonous environments.
But I call it my internal sociopath. So when like things go down and things go down hard and things go down rough, and you need to have that like all emotions aside. Like remember when what's his name, our buddy from years ago who fell off that cliff.
No,
when we were there.
No, that was
Josh. So in that moment, like, and I remember this, seeing him go limp when his brain noped out and was like, nope, we're not doing that. And then all that from that moment to when I came back down after calling the ambulance was the internal sociopath that didn't feel anything. Like, other than like, okay, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be done, this needs to be done. Don't give him water, like those things. So it's a useful tool.
I wouldn't call that sociopathy. I would just call that the harsh edge of love, like the mother there protecting its children.
Well, the reason why
it turns off its empathy enough to do what needs to be done that is loving and immediate, and it's an emergency response.
So the reason why I call it, or I equate it to sociopathy, it's not a pathy.
It's a way
because
for us
it's
to
not
relate
an illness, but it's
with what sociopathy
is. It's a survival mechanism.
Yeah,
and being able to remove the feelings of like
empathy for what you're fighting.
If I'm fixing your wound, like if I'm fixing your wound that you can't fix, I don't want to be feeling that.
Yeah.
So your brain somehow seems to be able to shut that off.
Yeah.
And what I understand of
that's love too.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
It's the conditionalist love. And maybe this is a way for someone that might have a sociopathic tendency to be able to understand what love is.
I've known a few, and they're getting in my truck during the zombie apocalypse because I'll trust them to put me back together. That's their thing. And we've had conversations about, like, I really like actually engaging with sociopaths. Once they figure out that but you're not like judging them for it, and they're not going to get anything out of you other than, oh, this is a fun game or a good time. Because they don't need to feel safe around you. That's not a thing. Like they're always, you're guarded because you don't want people to find out because there is the stigma, rightfully so, because sociopathy can become very dangerous for a community if the wrong people are in power. Politicians, people in the church, companies.
Negan from The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
that's a perfect example.
Yeah. Useful in a pinch, but not necessarily the person that you want to, doing the loving.
Not
care.
Healthy for society.
Yeah,
and you got to. But how does society deal with these things?
Oh, well, we used to put an axe in their hand and send them out on the battlefield and be like, "Yeah, I'm celebrating when they come home," and they're like, "Yeah, I'm the shit."
Ostracize them. There's lots of different ways to deal. The native cultures had their own. Some of them had their own ways of dealing with them.
And just because you can't feel other people's
pretty final. Yeah.
And actually, this goes with like even if you can't like feel the spirit of God and all this stuff, just because you can't feel it doesn't mean
less than 1% of the population, or around 1 or 2%.
It might even be less. No, it's super tiny.
It
and most of what you
by becoming an excessive materialistic society, you'll create a slightly higher gradation of that in people.
Well, it starts with that end. I think starts with narcissism. People start getting full of themselves and can't look away from the mirror. Like we literally have narcissism. Here, let's see your phone. So the depiction of Narcissus is him looking at himself in the mirror. Oh, this is nice and reflective. But how often are people doing this and not knocking on the selfie people, but even this
self-image too.
Like and even when you're not looking at your actual self, but like and you have to do this if you're like online and doing stuff, but maintaining the image of your
and even
brand,
people
if you will.
You wouldn't perhaps label as a narcissist outright. We all have ego.
Oh, we all can be that narcissistic guy,
that we want to put off a good image for other people, and we get attached to that image, and we think that's what we are. We start to believe that this self-image that we hold, this idea of ourselves that we hold in our heads, this jumble of thoughts and experiences and attachments and ideals and everything is what we are. That's when we seem to become incongruent, and that has been described as the fundamental root of the problem for mankind, for humankind right now, is that we are misidentifying with what we actually are. We think that we are the psychological sense of self that we hold in our heads when we are actually a part of this ongoing great mystery that is all actually one and interconnected and interreliant. And when it's fallen out of states of symbiosis with itself and its environment, then you can notice it. We have these powerful brains that can delineate and tell the difference between different objects. So I know this is a chair and I can sit in it and things like that. But I'm literally trading atoms with this chair and with you and with the camera and with the mic. And
yet you're not actually touching. How does that work? Just being repelled by electromagnetic fields.
Yeah. So here we are,
laughing at the absurdity of it all.
And learning to surf on the edge.
Well, you don't surf behind the wave; it leaves you in the dust, and you don't surf too low on it because you'll hit the churn. You gotta get that right little middle spot, and you can tail swish, and you can do some stuff.
Learn to play comfortably on the edge of our comfort zone, and we can deal with whatever crises that we are confronted with in our lives, because the thing seems to map the skill set. So say you become a great jazz improv sax player. Well, your skill at improvisation is going to map onto other moments in your life. just like any skill set seems to do. It'll inform your other skills and interactions.
And, you know, to
yeah.
a certain extent, that's for you to
Useful.
define, but in another extent, too, it takes other people to help define that in you as well.
Yeah, it does.
And maybe not necessarily in the stereotypical sense where somebody's like, well, I think you're actually really good at this and you should do that. But, like, you know, people inform you whether what you're doing is successful or not. You know, like the church and your you know, the people in your church, if you're a church-going person, they will help you and let you know when, you know, you're doing good or you're fucking up as well. And it's not like, as right now there's this common mindset where it's like, oh, it's just up for the individual to decide what they are and this, that, or the other. And it's like, to a certain extent, yes. But on the other end, it's also who you're around and what that decides that. And that's can be a dangerous thing too, because, you know, you hang out with miscreants and drug addicts, you might end up a miscreant and drug addict. And it's probably a pretty good, you know, like what our parents used to tell us, don't hang out with them boys, they're nothing but trouble. There might have been something to it. It becomes a problem when it becomes things like bigotry and not willing to change your mind and judging everybody according to their group, whatever group that is. But, you know, but it's still a necessary thing to almost, you know, like open up to your community. Now, if you're in a toxic community, you can't necessarily do that, but that's, you know, but if everybody's open with, and I've seen this, I've been a part of a community that was like that. Not a hippie community, an actual like small, nice little town. But like, you know, people were open to each other, even our flaws, you know, like, you know, all that was like open to each other, and we'd let each other know how we feel. Yeah, there's always the small town.
There's an honesty,
but there was an honesty.
Of the town. Yeah,
and
loving honesty, but it was upfront.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and even vulnerable to a certain extent, like, you know, people allowing themselves to be their less than perfect veneer that we all tend to put on.
Yeah.
And not all the time, and not equally in everybody, but like I think that's something we should, you know, try to foster within our anywhere you're at. Find people that you can make your community with and make it grow. Because we are not singular beings to be alone, but we're also not mindless drones. No, and we're not somewhere in between. We're uniquely.
It feels very much the answer to our times too. The world is becoming increasingly destabilized. Our economies are not doing so great. For the foreseeable future, things may continue to depreciate and break down, and we should be, I think, building the infrastructure, some scaffolding of something new in place, so that we have a nest, a net, a safety net beneath us to fall into, and so we can do that by integrating within our communities and further within our friends and family structures.
And it doesn't just have to be
knitting things together so we can be more self-reliant in case.
And it doesn't have to be locally just communities, just to get that clear.
No, the whole world
like
is
online communities or other communities or
the whole world is a part of this.
You know?
Yeah.
It's not just your town,
we can do this with people across the planet in various groupings and you know, shared projects that we're involved in. Yeah. Our communities can start communicating with one another around the world, and we have been. We're going through for the past, you know, 100, 200 years and more at an increasing rate, like with this telescoping evolution of intermeshing, intermingling, and clashing of our different cultures. And it's created jazz, soul, and rock and roll. It's created stand-up comedy and film and so many incredible art forms that the whole world has embraced and begun communicating and expressing through along with us. And we continue to impress upon each other different wise value sets, like we're incorporating so much of the wisdom of the East and understanding how to be more present, and we're incorporating that with the deep depth of ancient mystical sides of our wisdom schools, such as Christianity and Judaism and Advaita Vedanta and Hinduism and yoga and so many different forms of spiritual practice are now all informing one another. And so we've got to get past the clashing points to recognize this sense of continuity or congruence, the sense of oneness that we're all so graced to be a part of. But how to present that in terms that anyone can accept seems to be so difficult, and that's where I find the arts so powerful.
Turn
helping turn that into a part of our culture as people become more cognizant of this ongoing miracle and excited to be a part of it. The state of wonder seems to put us into a deep sense of presence And from there, if we can learn how to move and act, not just sit on the cushion, but bring it into our life. So whether we're washing the dishes or interacting with other human beings or on a stage or dealing with a difficult social situation or the myriad challenges of developing new infrastructures and ways of humans becoming more symbiotic with each other in the world, we can bring that flow state, we can bring that sense of presence, that sense of wonder, and be in concert with the great gift of love that we get to experience in this universe. Something along those lines.
Yeah, and I don't think the clash will ever stop, and it shouldn't. But we can turn it from chaotic clashing into nice cymbal hits and bell chimes, and
well, that's it. We can dance. It can become a dance.
Yeah, opposed to just this.
We've been perfecting that art through sports.
Oh, sure. What do we do with our
music? We do it in plays. We do it.
And what do we do with our aggressive tendencies as well?
Because we simulate them at chess. Yeah. Games.
Even hey, good old mosh pit. Mosh pits suck anymore, but sometimes it's real fun to get pushed around and maybe hit in the head. And,
teamwork kind of way. Yeah.
And if you fall down,
and pushing each other at the same time.
Grab you up and throw you out,
It puts you in the state of optimal grip with your environment and learning how to surf on the edge.
Well, and
it's a really cool way of doing it with one another.
Not to be a downer, but I'm going to continue to poke at what I think are the problems, and another problem that I'm seeing that is interfering with our ability to love each other is the suppression of aggression, but not on a level plane. So if you've ever tried to put a, I know this is really stupid, but a circular thing in a cup and try to push down on it.
It's becoming like a pressurized
we're pushing down on something
that's
uncompressible, and we're pushing down on one side opposed to the other. And if you just push on all sides and do it evenly, you'd find a balance point that then you can be on top of. But if you only push on one side, then the thing flips into the water. So it's
it's pure energy. Like every single strong emotion that comes through us. The yogis and their sects of Buddhism, like tantric, that practice learning how to take the things that could be considered things that can turn wrong or be used wrongly, finding ways to keep them in accord with the universe. So they celebrate sexuality, but in a state of communion and not doing it for the mere materialistic gratification. It's a long spiritual build-up.
I guess
it's a loving thing, and it's
more accurately where I'm going with this is.
And they do this with the art of war.
One thing we can do instead of just asking how is stop telling people that have natural, or even yourself, if you're naturally a more aggressive person, just don't be aggressive.
Find ways to expend that energy.
And because it's useful, and there's a deeper reason for why we have aggressive people as well as very passive people. But all times and all things have their own place. Or all things have their own place in time. And right now, and I can speak to what's happening in men. We've suppressed it in men so much that we've become weaselly little snakes for the most part. And I don't mean individually. I just mean the current culture of the Western man is a weaselly little snake. And I know that sounds really corrupt, but I use the term snake because the snake slithers through things, and it still has that aggression there. And it still has the inherent
the one that's
danger,
being
but now you don't
optimized
see
popularized in.
Well, yeah, because
society's lost.
I grew up in a time where it's I was in between the old, suck it up buttercup and you should have good self-esteem and you shouldn't worry about other people. I grew up in this weird spot that was in between, and I saw the change. And, the suck it up buttercup only goes so far, and it can hurt people. But the overly coddling people as well, or overly, you need to sit down and you need to
grow up still very much children looking for authorities to solve problems for them instead of figuring out how to solve them themselves.
Dangerous and aggressive as humans are, but without the knowledge and the examples of
harboring a lot of resentment,
not
blaming the outside for all the problems instead of finding ways to.
Well, how many movements in time and revolutions have we seen be consumed by what they were fighting against because they did not have the mature, wise stance.
Nietzsche warned us to, when we're fighting monsters, to not become the monsters ourselves.
Well, yeah, and that I think there's a suppression component. It's you don't want to be that. You don't want to be that. So you shouldn't be this way, and you shouldn't be this way. But if you're the person saying that to other people, now you're becoming it and you're feeding off of it. And that's where you get this sanctimonious, self-righteous,
and people think that's being good, signaling one's virtue.
Virtue signaling is a really good example of that, because it's a highly aggressive, destructive,
it's a demeaning
thing, but
way
it's
of pointing down and feeling superior without having to really do much actively in the world.
Which is a lazy
and it's
way
really
of going
very
about
much
it too.
like first world problems kind of thing. Like, we don't experience starving and poor access to clean water and things like that on a regular. So like, we're literally the 1% of the planet in that regard. The rest of the planet experiences that. 60% of the planet is in dire poverty, and billions of people. So here in the few hundred million that we are, 400 almost. We very much get to live as like the 1% of the planet, and then there certainly is a 1% of this 1%.
And I guess.
But yeah, we don't recognize like that we're fighting amongst ourselves, and we're blaming everything on everyone and everything else outside of us, and not realizing that we're part of an interconnected web, and that everything is filled with shades of nuance. And there's a way for us to exhibit the love that we seek to see in the world, rather than the darkness that we see in the world that disturbs us, that we're speaking against. We don't want to actively take part in that darkness. You can't use fire to fight fire. And that's, unfortunately, it seems what everyone's got lost in.
How do you learn that lesson? Yeah. And, I came down harshly on...
we misjudge everything. We blame capitalism, we blame socialism.
But I can't necessarily blame, say, like in the case of Western men, and I'm sorry. Like,
it's the corruptibility of humans in general.
Well, and the reason why I can't necessarily completely blame those that choose to be the Weasley greasy snakes and everything, or, even to the, virtue signaling and all that stuff, is because the people who tend to do that have never experienced anything that shows them that what they're pissed off about or trying to signal about actually doesn't mean anything, and it actually might be hurtful. Because when, say you're a farmer, you got a small farm plot, and you got to get up and you got to manage that property, and you got to do that.
Sure.
Well, saying, stop using plastic straws to save the sea turtles, you're like, yeah, okay, I don't really like straws or whatever, but no, you do this, do that, or the other. That it starts to look absurd. And you can see this, like Matt Walsh had that the "What is a Woman" thing, where he went to Africa and asked those African guys, and you watch the guys in the background, and you can see him just like when he's like explaining the West's version of gender and all that stuff. They're just like really, like, what the hell are you talking about? That's nonsense. That's but their existence, they live the way they live, and it's not this cushy, I have no troubles in my life, so I got to make a few more for myself.
Where you have this
and then I got to go take other people's
ultra-individualistic expression.
Yeah, and I think that, and I'm sounding harsh again, but sorry, it's irritating, but
we're all feeling so separate, and it's a symptom of our sense of feeling separate and trying to find a place and a way to belong in the world, an individual identity that feels like it matters enough to feel like you belong to something.
The hopeful thing in
this we're all looking outside for these things. We're looking for labels. We're looking for images and ways of expressing.
And we don't need to opine over somebody else's suffering in order to.
And we're already one. We get to write the story together. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is like, you have enough in your own life that you need to deal with, and it should be a blessing to do that. You don't need to feel good. Now, mind you, if you like to help other people and do that stuff, that's great. That's being of service. But you don't need to try to feel somebody else's pain or try to represent that or put that out there to actually go through that process, that the harsh portions of the process, like the volcanoes and all that stuff yourself. And you're gonna have to go through that, because the volcanoes are in you as well as in other places.
Yeah.
If your house it has lava encroaching on it, your neighbors is already burnt. Now, you need to get out of your house, because then you can't do nothing to help your neighbors. Regardless. So it's like the best thing we can do in the West with what we have as the 1%, instead of bitching and moaning about it, is make ourselves the best that we possibly can. And there will inevitably be a surplus, because we've already seen it. The world is doing better as far as poverty and eating than it's ever been.
And we want to continue. We want to continue writing that story together. So instead of damning
notice the worst that the Western civilized countries and that are doing now, the rest of the world is also doing horribly too, because we are this interconnected thing, and our overflow that is helpful for hey, you might live in a place that doesn't get rain.
So
other people who can produce the rain will, but you have to have a healthy system and a healthy community in order to maintain that.
And sharing with one another.
Yeah.
We've got to learn how to interact and interlink ourselves in new ways, and I see that happening.
And we're doing it.
As there's a fragmentation happening, there's something else happening underneath. There's so many people involved in this project.
The pieces are falling into a beautiful mosaic.
This new project.
You got to break some glass to make a mosaic. You know what I mean?
It's a crazy time, man. Yeah, we're trying to knit something new together, and while we're trying to learn to surf an increasingly growing tidal wave.
And we're experiencing pretty traumatic growing pains.
And we're having to retool the engine on our surfboard that we've already devised to be able to speed up exponentially to match the wave. So we're really good at surfing the wave. But now we're getting to a point where the wave's about to break, and we have to be able to survive the crash.
Yeah, dive into it. That's what the surfers do.
We've got to flow with it, man. Yeah, and then we're going to have to dive in and land.
And might even have to hold our breath for longer than what we think we can handle, but humans can handle a lot, man. Like, we've been almost wiped out a few times, and we've done it to ourselves occasionally.
This last couple hundred years, particularly this last 100 of living, this is something new. Humans have never gotten experience such lush and lavish lifestyles, and we're using so much energy now, even with new renewables coming online and everything. There's no way we're going to have enough energy to produce even the next 10 years of growth around the world.
Yeah, not if we have centralized systems.
Not even with existing oil and coal and existing infrastructure. We don't have it. Now we could start building more nuclear power. That might be one way of mitigating the crisis.
People take a lot less energy and consume a lot less when you spread them out.
Well, that's another thing.
And we're seeing a natural spreading. People are vacating the cities.
Cities are failing, and they're typically the support structures for civilization, where all of the great innovation is occurring. So you stack all these people into skyscrapers, and all their minds are in one place. So you can speed up the rate of innovation. As
all their
free trade
they generate a lot of heat. You got to get that energy from somewhere else.
We're all plugged in now. Yeah, we got the internet.
Hey, decentralized. We're sitting on my front porch.
So decentralized autonomous node networks is the way of the future.
And I can't wait to see somebody who comes up with...
Can we each become as autonomous nodes as we can be, and then help our communities become autonomous nodes, so that we're not so...
And that takes willing participation, and that's what I was talking about.
So that if one pillar crashes, like, the health industry is overly affected by a virus, education isn't affected, and our systems of distribution aren't affected. We have interdependent networks already built into place.
Yeah, Karl Marx said, seize the means of production, and he meant give it to the state, but I'm all about the decentralization of the means of production. I understand for certain things you do have to have factory scale and industrial scale. I get that.
Free trade has gotten us a long way, but it's easily taken advantage of.
Well, and I'm not even talking about free trade. I mean, like, figure out what you can do on your property and do it on your property.
Yeah. Well, free trade works, and I don't think capitalism is the worst thing in the world. I think it's the best thing we came up with so far.
As long as it doesn't turn into corporatism, it's okay.
But it can't turn into corporatism.
Your business owners in town
our founding fathers were terribly worried about that. Yeah, that challenge of corporate power. Andrew Jackson was quoted as saying that corporations have been enthroned and an era of corruption will follow, and he believed that there would be, I'm just prefacing this quote because I can't entirely remember it, he believed there would be a challenge to government, a trial of strength by big business, and an era of corruption would follow, and our children would wake up homeless on the continent that our forefathers had.
Here we are.
Yeah, and here we are. And that was repeated by forefathers up until present day, by the brave ones. And, Eisenhower, when he was leaving the presidency, in his farewell address, he said to the American people, beware the military-industrial complex. And by that he meant the business of war, the profiteers, weapons manufacturers, and energy conglomerates that profit from war. And even Thomas Paine in our nation's founding, all the way back, Thomas Paine said that there are nations who get their living by war is as shocking as it is true, but it becomes all the more unpardonable when those men seek to sow discord amongst nations to further enrich their pockets.
Well, you can't have corporatism without...
It's an old problem.
You can't have corporatism without an overreaching state. The military-industrial complex is not private owns of the means of production like you would think of it, like, I make my own stuff. No,
it's actually
the governments are saying only
very large way.
You and you can make these, and we're the only people that are allowed to make the contracts to have these things and to do this. And that's the corporatism end of it is the only way in my mind a corporation can get large enough to really like step on people and continue even long after they've decayed, like say like the Disneys and the mainstream newses and all that stuff. The only reason why they can still function is because they have a huge backing of the state. And by state, I don't just mean the government, but the authority that is of the people. So this is also the stock market as well. The stock market is a function of the state. It is a nationless state, but it's still the state. It's publicly owned. State and public are tied together. So, and that inherently centralizes everything. Whereas like a bad company, if it was actually like open enough with minimal regulations to keep people safe and not poison ourselves, because you still got to tell people to do that. We're not that enlightened yet.
That's the problem.
But like overly regulating means I can't do a lot of the things that I'd love to do because I can't afford the paperwork costs and all this, that, or the other. And I can make it better quality than the people that are allowed to come and stick things on your house and do whatever that are usually crap that you end up complaining about. But I can't because of this, and this. And some of them are valid. Like, you know, you don't want somebody like building your house that doesn't know how to build a house or know
so
why.
So we need some regulations and protections in place.
But like, well, you know, it's a self-regulating system. The science system, like what they accept as like, you know, the peer-reviewed system, depending on who you ask, is corrupt. Yeah. But like how, like the reason why certain methods of experimentation are more valid than others.
The fact that it wants to challenge itself and constantly self-correct and goes for the truth, no matter whose opinions are.
Obviously, this doesn't work. It has these inaccuracies, and we want to be the most accurate we can. So you know, do this. And there's all different modes and methods to do things, and some are more acceptable than others, particularly when it comes into the social sciences. But but that seems to be like kind of what the ideal science is kind of how, like, if we're to regulate things and do that, is how we should go about doing it. What works and what doesn't. The government says you have to have a fume hood in your lab and pump it outside, but we're at a point right now where we have easy access to fume hoods and all that other stuff, and any self-respecting lab person that doesn't want to kill themselves is going to have a good... So
the answer for this, we try to develop business ethics. We've had moral systems for eons that help human beings hopefully be better people, and these systems are failing, and they become institutionalized, and they start to often lose their way. They become corrupted, and that is the eternal problem. So even when you create something like the capitalist system, you have the stock market, you have free trade, you have some meaningful regulations that are necessary to keep people safe.
And also there has to be an acceptance that, yes, some people are going to...
There is greed in man, and man will take shortcuts whenever. And those weapons contractors, it's very easy to bribe somebody if you're from China, or just to convince that company to start working with you in some way. But if money and profit and power are the primary drivers, and there is no moral substructure by which we find ourselves orienting by, then we're very lost, and the planet and the people in mass are in danger.
And we shouldn't forget, the Pareto distribution.
And how to correct and find ways to answer for that as
well. And sometimes not even correct, because we have to allow billionaires to exist and millionaires below them and all that.
High creators to exist, even if you take the money out of it.
The stars do it.
Super
the
galaxies
creators.
How to help them flourish without sucking from the other, like a redwood tree will do this, and it's sucking the life of everything around it at the same time, or it's keeping those other plants from being able to grow as tall. So how do we find a way to harness the power of the super industrious and the super creative so that it still benefits everything and everyone around it as much as possible?
Stop trying to drag the people down on the top.
Without doing it by regulations. Here again, I see the law of love and us finding a way to interlink our moral systems of the past and upgrade our understandings of our relationship with God and the ineffable, the great mystery. Like, we're having to do a lot right now. We're having to face the failings of our institutionalized sides of our religious systems. we're having to face the failings of our own moral guidestones.
So
and nobody agrees on America, the ideal of America, or the idea of God or the transcendent anymore. So we don't have these moral guidestones anymore. So that's why we're seeing this breakdown, this fracturing, people trying to find meaning in increasingly separate ways. You know, like super over individualizing and expressing through these very complex images, and still finding ourselves miserable. In fact, increasingly miserable and anxious and depressed.
So, you know,
and divided.
Those that are keen to have that mindset are wonderful, love you and everything. But so how do we incentivize those who won't have that mindset? Whether they're the billionaires that like couldn't be bothered morally to stop doing, you know, like what Amazon does to their employees and all that stuff. Well, one thing we do is with the market, you stop buying their crap. Or you convince them in a way that it is more more.
That's one thing.
It's more profitable.
It's more profitable
for you to play our game than it is for you to impose your game on us.
The morality of the most powerful people in the world.
Well, the market, like stop buying their crap
through our art.
Stop participating. And
through our
provide
art.
Something that's better. Well, like what Tim Pool's doing.
Through our conversations.
He's creating his own little cultural.
Lex Friedman. People he has conversations with, even if he doesn't agree, he lets them express themselves. Rogan does it.
And the people that are best at it and at the right point in time, if it's merit-based, will rise to the top, and the Pareto distribution will be a healthy one, not the most corrupt go to the top.
Yeah.
You know, like, because, like...
Well, look at that. With Rogan, somebody willing to talk to anybody.
I never would have thought Joe Rogan would be the guy he is. He was Fear Factor Joe, man. He was the guy making people eat weird bugs and shit. You know, it's like, dude.
Such a strange anomaly.
But it kind of makes sense now in retrospect, you know. It's like, okay, well, you know.
He's a fair-minded person. Yeah. He's willing to hold ideas without believing in them and look at them. And,
he laughs at the absurdity of the universe as well, which is
he's
like,
willing to change his viewpoints. He's called far-right, yet he supported Bernie Sanders. And he's just the greatest amalgamation of various traits from people that lean right and left. So he's very much a modern day Renaissance figure in a sense, and we have many of those kinds of people around the world today. And
and we're actually,
that seems to be the thing that people are most excited about and giving the most attention to.
And we have the technology now,
beating all the leading anchors on all the major NBC, ABC, CNN, Fox, independent journalists, Russell Brand, and people like that. We are looking for what is best for long-term survival as evolutionary beings. And we're recognizing it in these people that are telling the truth. They're authentic. We can recognize authenticity in people when we see it. And that seems to be a survival function as well, because we're looking for truth. We're looking for what is most congruent and is going to be most in accord with nature and the world and environment around us. We're looking for the good ways of... We're looking for leaders, and the greatest leaders we're discovering are the ones not who lead best, but who help create more leaders
and brought the most amount of people together. And like truth is one of those great concepts things that, like, truth is all encompassing and it brings people together. And we are creatures that like togetherness. So it's like the striving for finding the ultimate truth, which is the ultimate comfort, because something that we all can agree on, then we're all together, you know. And we fought wars over this, you know, like whose truth. Well, you know, and now we're at the point right now where, like, and
I get closest to it when we make the right joke, or we celebrate in music, when we ritualize our interactions, when we turn our wars into sport and games.
And
because you talked about the suppression of aggression. We're not finding ways to challenge ourselves that are healthy, and we're not integrating our shadow sides, our propensity and ability to be able to be violent and aggressive. We're not finding ways to...
We're not wrestling with our demons either.
Wrestle with that demon.
Demons, I have a theory about this. Your demons are there
that monster
to hold the worst parts of yourself, like be anchors onto the worst parts of yourself, so you can walk away from them and have it shed, or like weights that pull it off. But demons are heavy, and the less you rip out, you know, the shadow shedding skin, the less demons you rip off, the heavier you get. But if you don't have any demons, though, you're just a whiff in the air. So, you know, like, so it's, you know, it'd be really nice to be an ethereal being, all that stuff, but that's also terrifying.
So it's to be in the dance with the demons, like, so when you see a figure like Ramana Maharshi,
in a non-sacrilegious
Buddha, or
way.
Jesus Christ found a way to, instead of being in a pure repulsion, in a pure oppositional defiance, polarizing manner. They found a way to dance.
Well, he
with,
took that
and
time
even
to go.
love.
He took the
'Cause
time to
Jesus
go
taught
visit the devil
even love,
for 40 days.
to even love those who
30
hurt
days.
us, who turn against us, who persecute us, who do violence to us, to turn the other cheek.
Peace starts with your enemy, and only your enemy first.
Yeah.
Because that,
And we have the enemy within. Like, we are capable of the atrocious acts that we have seen throughout history.
Well, one of the first things...
Every human culture has enslaved its neighbors and itself, its own people, subdued its own people and its own kind, and the neighboring people around it.
Well, now we're at the point where we subdue our own selves.
Sounding different, looking different, dressing different, having different belief systems. But we also found ways to interrelate and incorporate our various belief systems together over eons, and our modern religious systems are based off those amalgamations of the past.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful process, and it's still ongoing, and we're right in the midst of
beautiful and terrible all at once. Like Gladriel, beautiful and terrible.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Bring up some Tolkien. I'm cultured. What?
Well, that's a beautiful way of expressing the ultimate nature of reality.
Get that later on you?
Yeah. Somewhere.
Oh, I've got it. Oh my goodness.
There you go.
That stream of consciousness. Sometimes you're in the flow so much you forget you have a body that has things in it.
How long we've been streaming for here? About 1:40.
An hour 40?
I don't know if we have anybody tuned in. I don't have any windows open. But
somebody will watch it. I hope you get something out of this.
I think I mentioned on the Actuali podcast stream that if we had any questions for people to post them, so I'm going to see if we have any
while you're
comments.
checking that out, I want to let people know. Though I seem harsh, it's only because I actually really do care, and it's not so judgmental. It's just pointing out, because I'm not above any of the I can be a Weasley snake as well, but it's stuff that we all really need to get over. And another thing is being able to show
it's a good image,
show that within yourself to other people as an example. Like
the willingness to admit that we all have that. That we
comedians
that
do it
snake
too.
is a great symbol for that aspect of human
Sure.
beings, that propensity. So it's the eyes of fear and the eyes of love, as Bill Hicks suggested. And this is such an easy way to orient the world. Are we looking through eyes of fear, or are we looking through eyes of love? The eyes of fear want us to buy bigger locks for our doors and bigger guns to protect ourselves. With the eyes of love, just see us all as one. And so coming from which orientation, so we can catch ourselves and find when which orientation, when we're falling into the orientation of survival instinct based off of fear, or evolutionary instinct based off of congruency, love, communion, interrelating, inter everything, interconnectedness that is available, that mode of interconnectedness.
And it's not all good, it's not all bad, but it sure is beautiful, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. This time in life right now, we are so lucky. Even with all the craziness going on, we're so lucky to exist at this period of time. Like, we're so lucky that
it's to be alive, isn't it?
It's only happened. It's only happened to like 8 billion people to be here at this period of time, experiencing what humanity is experiencing in different ways, of course, depending on where you're at and what your deal is. But still, and that's one thing too. Earlier in the discussion, you mentioned, finding, paraphrasing, but finding, wisdom in, the lowest places or places you wouldn't expect. And one thing, talk to a crazy homeless, not all crazy homeless people, but if one's got something to say, or the lowest among us, go find that, go talk to those people. What's your story, man? Dude, we like it. We like that man on the street talking, you go talk. Make sure you're safe, because the world is also not a safe place. But go talk to that guy that you see on the street all the time. Even if he's, if you live in a place like I do, we don't necessarily have, the people camped out and doing all that stuff. But you see the same guy every morning, or same lady every morning drinking her coffee outside of the 7-Eleven. You probably know one of the guys I'm talking about, but he was always in his wheelchair wheeling around, and he knew everything going on in town. And he had a story to tell, but even if the stories don't teach you anything, the engagement will. And even if the most minimal thing is, well, I don't want to end up there. That's the most egoic way you could go about doing it. But even if you just get that out of it, go talk to the lowest of the low. Don't be afraid to, that scary person that you're not supposed to go talk to. Well, you can go talk, and, if you get too weirded out and you can't handle it, then yes, back off, but just do it. You know, and this is only from my own experience. Like,
well, Christ spoke of this too. It's, you know,
well, he wasn't up at the churches doing that. Yeah, he was hanging out with prostitutes, gamblers, thieves. A guy who's like sold him for some, you know, like sold him for some gold. You know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's like, yeah, because we're not going to get anywhere just speaking, just preaching to the choir. You don't get anywhere. No. You got to go out into people, and if you can't physically do that, you know, for any reason that you physically can't do that, you can still do that in one way or another. Even if it's just like videotape yourself speaking to, you know, say, you know, people who may not know as much about something, or, you know, like, we don't all got to pretend like we're super smart talking to super smart people here. You know, it's like,
I love that you're saying this, though. This is so important, and this is reaching out to the downtrodden and the most suffering among us, and bringing everybody into a place where we can commune together. My buddy Gary Burgle, who has been on this podcast before, and he's a great friend of mine. He's become very much a mentor in a lot of ways. He's starting something called Heritage Harvest, I believe, and it's going to be a nonprofit, and he's going to just be hosting dinners in public places where we can bring together everybody together, and we can just commune in a state of lovingness and kindness and sharing, and to do that very thing that Christ recognized as something so integral to being a whole human being.
It's fulfilling on the deepest level, I can tell you that.
It's healthy for our communities. It's incredibly healthy for us as individuals.
Your communities become safer the more you do that as well.
Yeah.
Like, because here's the thing, is like, in two ways. In the happy end of things, it makes it safer because you're providing opportunities that can help people out that, you know, would either become a hazard to themselves because of how they're living, people or hazards to other people.
As much as anyone.
But then you'll also be able to see the free rider.
Yeah.
In there, those that, like, as those who only want to destroy will not get in the middle of the people who are creating and facilitating. So the stronger you have that, then you can actually see who and what in the community is
those
not
people
necessarily have the best
part, or they'll just wander away.
Yeah, and I do work and hang out at a place that, you know, we do, like, you know, outdoor theater, and, you know, you can cut a tree down and turn it into any board that you want, and you can do things with metal and all that stuff, and we don't really have you know, who's allowed and who's not allowed, which usually devolves into chaos a lot of times. But the way we do it is we're just weird enough that if you can't hang with it, it's probably not for you, and the free riders do not hang, you know. Occasionally I see some people that I'd rather not have around because of other issues, but that's where you have to have consensus with your community too. It's like, okay, well, you're willing to put up with these behaviors, but don't, I won't say I told you so, but I'll say I told you so. Yeah. You know, it's like...
Well, the lost are all suffering too, and they're suffering because they've been mistreated by those not seen through eyes of fear, and now they live lives.
You don't have to cast them out when you have a really strong community of people.
Yeah,
they won't. They'll be like they'll be like the wild wolves around the end until they realize, oh, that fire's comfy, and they feed me, and then becomes a valued, you know, community. Yeah. It's funny how we like the predator people we tend to assume to be like wolves, but also wolves are something that we've turned into, like,
that's
dogs from this big, dogs to this big, you know. Like,
really beautiful story is in our history of humanity is that one of the greatest saving graces of our species is that with that process of the wolves hanging around outside and then getting closer and closer, and the ones that were hunting rats close to our fires or getting meat thrown at them slowly became subdued over time.
Or we kept other predators or other wolves away from them, and they were able to breed next to us. And
now they're like our best friends. They're the most loyal and unconditionally loving animals on the planet, and they've really taken on the best of our characteristics. So they're part us, and we've become very much part them, and we're teaching each other as we continue to go through life together. Dogs are incredible. Like, if only humans could be as loving and truly loyal to one another and forgiving.
Oh, we'd be wasting our time just going, "Oh my God, how are you doing? What's going on, man? Dude, I haven't seen you in like 5 minutes." We get nothing done. We need a little cat in us, a little bit of that. No, I'm doing something. Thank you.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like you're doing anything. Trust me, I'm doing.
But they need to know that the safe orientation is to be loving and be a part of the pack as they're being raised as well.
And then also the other thing with dogs is,
because if they're not, then they could be very.
They'll naturally learn
dangerous.
where their hierarchy is, and in the case of dogs, the hierarchy is, in my opinion, is at the bottom end of the dog is only above in hierarchy above the person trying to break in the house. And you'll see this in behavioral issues with dogs that think they're higher up in the hierarchy than the guests in the house. And that's where from the humping to the jumping all over to all and not the I'm excited at first
running around wildly and up and down.
And so. And I know hierarchy is one of those words we don't like, but we naturally form hierarchies, whether they're competence hierarchies or like clout hierarchies or this, that, or the other. And actually, sometimes it's healthy because we want to root for the guy that's got the most trophies, that's MVP, that's awesome. He's at the top end of that performance hierarchy, and we love it. But it's only the only times I think that we really appreciate it is when it's truly earned.
Yes.
Because you can be a brutal dictator or
forced,
and force it, and then even your dog, even though he's loyal to you, is still going to hate you.
Act with authority that gains
or fear you at least.
Control by force of violence, by threat of violence. It's a lot harder to have respect for. That's a healthy respect that you feel in concert with, than an authority that is learned. So, like in the village structure. The elder that was known for giving it that throughout his life for a long time has been known for giving good advice, is often gone to help solve disputes, and people will listen to him because they know he's proven it over time that he's reliable and wise. And that's a natural that the anarchist recognizes that kind of naturally earned authority.
Yeah, it doesn't mean no authority. It just it's no meritocratic authority, and it's going to be given to you by everybody that's around you.
And you recognize that, and someone that sings really well, and if you want to sing, then you're going to be like, you are an authority of knowledge that I'm willing to bow down before, show me your way, help teach me.
Know how to sing very well is a really good vocal coach.
Sure.
Every master, the goal of every master in my mind should have your proteges become better than you ultimately, right?
Yeah.
So the people I respect the most are the people with that intention. It's like, I'm doing this to make you better than me, and parents should ultimately do that.
The joy of the teacher and the master. It feels even greater than when they did it themselves or when they do it themselves, to be able to help someone else learn how to do it and even go beyond them.
Yeah. And that means you really for the master themselves. That means they know it's reaffirming in the sense of you have the knowledge, but also the wisdom.
Yeah.
Because to be able to convey a lesson to somebody, it takes a high level of wisdom of whatever that lesson is. And I think that's an issue with our modern day teachers. Not all of them, but a lot of them. They don't have deep wisdoms of what they're teaching. They're just doing it by rote. And of course, the quality of education is garbage now. Because of that. It's like, we're not I always thought when I was a kid, college was a place, you got wisdom. Yeah, you got knowledge, but you got wisdom. But then when I got of age to, late high school, I was realizing, I was like, no, college is just where a bunch of ponces go to pontificate on.
It's very much a mixed bag nowadays. 'Cause it depends on the professor you get.
And also what type of
how ideologically possessed that person is, or how open-minded they are.
Down into grade school level ends, and that's really what I'm talking about on that end too. Like the grade school teachers that I'm seeing now have no clue about what they're teaching, whereas old school you're teaching the kid addition and subtraction, but your math teacher in elementary school should know addition and subtraction keenly inside and out, as well as other forms of math. Because what happens if your student knows more about the subject than you do? And that's where you get the really brilliant. And
you want to be able to help that kid a little bit more.
And how are you going to earn their respect? If you don't have wisdom, maybe the kid knows more than you, but you have wisdom of how to use this properly in real life.
Yeah.
Because you have, the stereotypical.
You have to teach people how to think, not just what to memorize and regurgitate.
Yeah.
Or else you're not helping them as a teacher, not being a teacher, you're just being a distributor of ideology.
And what you can do with the thinking too. Really inspirational teachers for me, just them teaching and how they interacted was a good example of what you can do with this knowledge. And then, I didn't learn trig and calculus until I started building crap that I had to plan for. So nobody in school taught me the importance of algebra and what it's used for and all that other stuff. And we complained about it. They're like, well, you know, so the joke was, you never use this stuff, but it's like, well, actually, if you're somebody like me that does like mechanically driven things and pattern-based stuff, extremely useful. I don't know why I didn't learn this. This would have been right up my alley, but unfortunately, there's no like, there was no reason for it. And this actually,
our school system is very much still instruction-based. Instead of teaching kids how to critically think and solve problems, it's much more memorize, regurgitate, because we were training people for factories before, so you got to be able to be obedient, acquiescent to authority, move when you hear the bell or the drill, and get on to your next task.
And to a certain extent,
you weren't allowed to get too much
learning
in any subject.
regimentation can be really important and impactful for people.
Sure,
but
but overly
I think
regimented.
At the core, I think at the core is teaching them the necessity for this knowledge or this practice.
Yeah, you got to teach regimentation as well as organic, open-ended
and
creativity.
Not just do it because, but it's like do it because of this and because of this. Like,
learn how to be in flow with creativity, and then how to utilize both of those things at once. In the arts that require that kind of dexterity of using left and right brain modes.
And so this like in you might have heard this starting to become a little bit more used, and maybe some people watching have heard this, but like it's something I think Dennis Prager said first, and then I just saw Gothics on YouTube talk about it. But instead of teaching people that there is a God, you teach them the necessity for there to be a God. And it's the same thing with anything
transcendent
you learn.
ideal.
Yeah,
I mean, must all be obedient to, like even the kings. That was how religion worked before.
Because I can teach you.
But it's got to be compelling now, because now we can see underneath the substructure of everything with our science and our mass knowledge and the internet and access to all the world's information and traditions all there in one place, like out in the open. Yeah, you can see underneath everybody's religion, everybody's government. You can see the interworkings of everything.
What's the necessity of all this that we're going through, the universe, and what's the necessity for it?
Yeah.
If you want to know why God created the universe, if you believe that there is a God that created such thing as a universe, sorry atheists, but I'm going to be theist here. Wondering, why would God create all this? Well, what is the necessity? It's like, it wasn't just like, let there be light. And no, like, what does God need out of this? Like, if God created everything, why? And what is, and it's not a want, it's a need. And
God's love is perfected
I think
in us.
it's growth. It's the only way for something that is infinite and everywhere and everything to actually exist is to infinitely cycle through everything that it possibly can be.
And then to understand why all of that happens.
And understanding
directly
why
experience.
is God.
So it forgets the omnipresence that it is. It experiences life through unique expressions of existence, all different kinds of ways, all different animals, plants, and even self-aware human beings. It experiences love and why love matters in all of the different ways that it can through every single individual experience of that, and then all the trials and tribulations that are coming to being in love and out of love. And so we were talking about love before, and the opposite of love, it seems like, and I heard the teacher, non-dual teacher Adyashanti speak on this once, and he talked about how there's only love and then there's symptoms
of love, of
there being a lack of love. And so I found a paraphrasing for that. There's only love and the symptoms of the lack thereof. And that makes so much sense. I would have to agree with that.
And then the reaction we have, the initial reaction is fear. So it's like love, and then, well, and maybe perhaps like there's the duality that we put like in Christianity, where there's God, which is everything and is love, and then Satan, which is the thing that forcefully separated, and in in the Hermetic teachings is the space in between everything. So it's the everything and then the lack of everything, the space in between, and you wonder why there's a necessity for evil and like Satan and the things that separate us all. It's because, well, we wouldn't be having these beautiful instances and seeing the flowers if we're all just goop.
We wouldn't feel love or beauty. Everything has to exist.
Well, the two faces
for existence,
the tragedy and comedy face for theater.
There has to be the yin, the yang. There has to be the dark for there to be light. There has to be temperature, so hot for there to be cold.
The everything, the nothing, the the hope, the despair, the
and so it's not like there's so God is very ambiguous. The idea of the omnipresent or what transcends us or the source of this universe is so ambiguous, and I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of it. Yet it does track that we can break down constituent elements scientifically, and that evolution is real. So if we can find the conjoiner between atheism and theism, whatever the slash between, if you put an A and then a slash and then theism, finding what that slash between signifies, what that points us to, this ambiguous state of recognizing that God is love and everything. It also can break itself down into sensical, measurable patterns.
The full God in my mind, and I want to make this clear because I only got...
It's both and instead of either or.
It's the everything and the nothing. So like Satan itself is not actually separate from God.
It's pure
either.
Void and pure potentiality. There couldn't be pure potentiality without pure void. Yeah. The love is what seems to allow it to express itself creatively.
And the love can have both.
To have the big thing, to create the universe.
Love truly has... Love even has the absence of love in it as well. It's one... Ain't that a concept, right? Yeah. Something that has the absence of itself within itself. Yeah. It's like a ball that is not a ball, as well as being a ball.
Yeah, like, it's a word that
how
points
do you grasp that?
Yeah, this underlying nature of reality. It's wild.
And like one thing I try to quest to do is how to simplify. I don't want to say advanced in like the advanced. We're talking about advanced thing, but like advanced, very deep concepts, and how do you simplify them in a way?
Oh yeah,
and I think story has a component of that.
Story,
and not just limited to traditional writing out
ways
stories,
to recapitulate some of these concepts and story.
But even talking about it, like what I did today and what happened to me today. Let me tell you that story. Even that end of it, like I think.
It's another way of conveying. Yeah, there's the underlying truth you can convey in any moment.
To make it simple, and using personal references is something we do. Like, to explain this thing. Well, let me tell you like an instance that something similar happened that led me to this belief.
This is how I saw it. This is what happened. Yeah.
Actually, right now we're having a conversation, but we're telling a story to a certain degree. Just a lot of different stories that we're Cloud Atlas and
we're
pulling it all together.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's that much going on right now, and it seems like everything's increasingly accelerating towards some singularity point, and nobody knows what happens after that point.
You never get to the center of this. There's
no after autopilot.
There's no after the singularity. The singularity just keeps being a singularity.
You're right. You can't just
far
love.
Away.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the closer you get, the further away it is. Yeah.
It's like, damn. So we know I've been waiting for the singularity to happen, man.
Well, being in a state of love actually does help because you're radiating that way of being, and more people pick up on that. But also, we need action. We need hope, not just hope as an expectation or some idea of what we hope will be, but we need actionable hope. We need actionable solutions, and it seems that love is at the root of allowing us the widest way of looking at the world and incorporating as much information as we can, considering as widely and as deeply as we can, being so that we can be full of careful enough as we approach these crises and solving them.
Careful enough to stand under, to understand.
Yeah, coming into them with full of care so that we hopefully can land this thing. We can survive this dive.
I think we will. It might not be super graceful parkour, but right. The worst that's going to happen, we'll probably break a leg. It'll slow us down a little bit, but then after the leg heals, we'll probably be better off with the drive to be like, okay, well, this happened to me, but I still want to do it.
If this trend of people awakening to this unified purpose that we can all take part in, this great project, an alternative to the corporate great reset that's being proposed, humanity, the people themselves of all the nations.
If I eat the bugs, they're going to be my bugs.
Utilizing this internet we've created, maybe we can devise a way to surf this wave together, and we can become interdependent nodes of an expression of the way of transcending the greatest challenges that we face as individuals and as communities, and we can pick up on what each other are doing and help inform each other, and through that interrelation, we might just cycle out of this.
We're already doing it.
We are, though.
And I know there's a lot of doom and gloom because, what bleeds leads, right?
Yeah.
But we're already doing it, just go online and you can find any, feel-good story about somebody, bringing electricity or power somewhere else, and it's not some billionaire doing it. It's some guy that got some fucking textbooks in his fucking village or his town, and started tinkering with stuff, and then other people see that and be like, man, that's awesome. I'd like to do that here. And then, you know, like people getting inspired by each other. I'm seeing it over and over.
Everywhere.
And there's ample proof.
Jesse just sent me, Jesse from our band, American Dharma, sent me a video by Z-Dog MD the other day, and I was really excited to see how he was speaking about the ongoing division and the polarity in our world, and the solution to that, of course, being our love and deepening our capacity for being in meditation, and bringing meditation into our lives. And you know, I'm hearing that mindset, that invitation. You know, Russell Brand's putting that out there, and just limitless numbers of not limitless, but so many upcoming YouTubers and people on other networks that are all tapping into this. And so it feels like we're orienting into the mode of being that will allow us to realize the solutions that we seek, because we're going to have to come up with new solutions, new ways of integrating with one another and with the world around us in order to surf this wave, these myriad potential existential crises that our species faces. So it's such an exciting time to be alive, and it's such an honor to get to meet this challenge and to hopefully help inspire others through the art of music. As we get to, I love doing this podcast, and since I brought up Jesse, I also wanted to make sure I remembered to share that he's doing weekly wake-ups now, which are insights shared from meditation. And Jesse's also a lifelong meditator himself. He's been meditating for a very long time, and in the Zen tradition, and has a lot of beautiful insights to share. So I want you guys to check that out. They're like nice little tidbits. Nice little morsels of wisdom that are just like 5 minutes each. They're nice short videos, but they're really good.
Where does he got that at?
And he's got that on, if you look up Jesse Neal on YouTube and look up Weekly Wake Up. If you use Jesse Neal and Weekly Wake Up together, you should be able to find it. I'll put that in the show notes on all the various places. And also, you guys, if you're in the Martinsburg area or the DC metro area, go check out Spice Connection.
Great food. Oh, yeah.
Freaking amazing Indian
Chef
cuisine.
knows what he's doing.
Wanted to make sure that we rep Spice Connection in the house. He's bringing a lot of love and light to our town of Martinsburg. We're not in Martinsburg right now, but my town, and Chef Udbir Rawat's town of Martinsburg. So, so check out Spice Connection if you're in the DC metro area. It is worth it.
And he's also just
master chef,
really good dude outside of the Martinsburg
amazing
community
human
too.
being.
There's so many people with him. He's in my community.
Definitely
the next town over, and other people that know him, and he's just a good guy.
Yeah.
Ask him about his tiger.
Yeah.
Apparently he had a tiger when he was a kid, so if you want
he had a pet tiger named Jackie when he was a kid.
If you want a tiger story while you're eating goat vindaloo,
you'll get to hear that story.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, his vindaloo is awesome.
Dude.
I mean, the guy, he cooked for prime ministers and high levels of state, and
his buffet,
and 5 diamond whatever, restaurants all over the world.
Don't let the size of the chafing dishes themselves fool
Sydney,
you. His buffet is top notch and awesome, and it'll
UK.
You can empty the tray and it'll come out fresh again. So it's like, I don't know when he does the buffet, but you ever get the chance to do the buffet, it's great, because like if you're new to
Fridays,
Indian food,
Saturdays,
you can try
and Sundays now. Yeah, he's only doing it Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays during the day from like 11:30 to 2:30, I believe. Oh my God.
Martinsburg, West Virginia.
I might be up there tomorrow actually with my buddy Gary.
My mouth is starting to water now.
Oh my God, dude! Yeah, there's some of the best food.
I can't really eat the lentils anymore, but the
cream
dal
spinach
soup is
so
pretty
good.
Good too.
Oh man!
But I got to be careful with the lentils.
Yeah,
it's like,
I go up there for spices too. He sells his own spices.
Everything he uses too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He roasts and grinds his own cumin seeds and everything. Like he's a wild man.
And he can do Ayurvedic cooking too.
He's
Ayurvedic. So if you got
trained.
eating issues or health issues or anything like that, sensitive stomach.
Yeah.
Like every time
you can do it however you need it, with coconut milk instead of with regular milk, oil and this and that. And he uses organic and free-range animal ingredients, and everything is very healthy and next level.
Yeah. So Spice Connection, Weekly Wake Up. Yeah,
Thank you guys for tuning in to Actuali Podcast. Look forward to future episodes where DJ and I go through John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, which will be very on topic and furtherance of this conversation.
I'll bring some of those topics down to caveman level, because that's where I have to.
That's what I want to do, because I can barely keep up with some of these guys, and they're having amazing conversations. I want to bring them on the podcast too, but I'm still learning how to even understand these crazy articulate human beings.
So one thing that helps me
and keep up with them. But yeah, finding a way to translate this for everybody. Yeah.
One thing that helps is like, so when you watch, like, and I've noticed when I watch him talk, even without knowing what, like, you know, like a conceptual word is or a referential word or other things are, you get a really good image of the broader low resolution message point.
You do get an idea
that he
of
has. So just
the train of conversation where it's going.
Stick with, and actually this is with anybody that, like, or anything that you think is higher concept than what you can handle.
Yeah.
Look for the broad strokes first.
Yep.
And they're always in there.
And then you'll start to understand what those individual words, because of what's surrounding them and everything. Yeah. So it all pieces itself together one way or another. That'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, thank you guys. Look forward to much more from Actuali. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Love you guys. Talk to you soon.